This episode is part of a series that's been made possible with the financial assistance from the West Virginia Humanities Council, a state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Across the country, the tense relationship between African American communities and police officers has become a regular part of the news cycle. We've heard a lot about black men dying at the hands of the police. High-profile cases like Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, Freddie Gray in Baltimore, Maryland, and Philando Castile in St. Paul, Minnesota, just to name a few. There's no doubt that these events shape people's views toward the police and toward activist groups like Black Lives Matter. So lately, I've been asking folks in my hometown of Charleston, West Virginia, how are relations between the police and the black community here? And I've gotten some wildly different answers.
Our police department here is the best damn police department I've ever seen or heard of in my life, and I'm 40 years old, and I'm not lying. They are looking out for us. They are not the ones killing us. They are not the ones taking from us. We are doing it to ourselves.
Our problem here is just police brutality, and I call it DWB, driving while black. They'll see you driving while black, and they'll pull you over for that.
You know, Charleston is pretty progressive, and it has came a long way, a lot faster than some more rural areas have done.
A lot of colored people hold the history and the actions of a few against the general population of the whole.
You have police officers that unless they had a badge or a gun, they're not coming in the neighborhood. They don't drive through it. They don't know the people. They don't know the community, and they wouldn't come through here. They're afraid of them.
For every person who thinks the police are honorable, considerate public servants, there's another who thinks they're untrustworthy or racist. And for every person who thinks that black activists and social organizers are sticking up for basic human rights, there's another who thinks they're just race baiting or stirring up drama. But there's one thing everyone agrees on. Like other parts of the country, West Virginia is not a place where we like to talk about these things.
You've got me so nervous right now.
I don't know if it's because we're more laid back, more country, if you will.
And there are plenty enough people here that disagree with the anti-fascists and the Black Lives Matter people. Hate them. But they're not going to put that on the national news. They'd rather stay in the closet, so you're not going to worry about it. Ferguson here. That's not going to happen.
So in a place where we're uneasy talking about these things, what happens when you suddenly start talking about them? From West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX, this is Us and Them, the podcast that brings you stories from America's cultural divides. I'm Trey K. Today, a case study from my hometown of Charleston, West Virginia. The story of an effort to change these tense perceptions between the police and the black community by bringing that tension out into the open. And there's a racially charged murder trial pending that may put this bold initiative to the test. In a lot of ways, our story starts with Takaya Smith. She's a young black woman in West Virginia. Now, Smith isn't originally from Charleston. She grew up in the nearby town of Hurricane. But she attended West Virginia State University, a historically black university in a town just outside of Charleston. That's where she really started delving into civil rights for the first time.
My conversations about race prior to college was like Martin Luther King, and he was so sweet and endearing, and eventually white people said, okay, we do see you as people, and everybody held hands, and that's what happened.
In college, she learned that there was more to the story. And as she became aware of the injustices against black people still happening today, she wanted to take action. That's how she ended up as an intern for the American Friends Service Committee, a Quaker organization that focuses on social equality. Smith was always bugging her boss, Lyda Shepard, for ways that she could help out. So one day in 2015, Shepard told Smith about a community meeting that was going to take place across town. Police and community leaders were all going to be there talking about crime. Shepard told Smith she should go on behalf of the organization.
And then she says, oh my gosh, why don't you bring up that racial disparity we talked about, like in arrests? Like, this might be a good place to do that.
According to police statistics, the Charleston Police Department, or CPD, was arresting more black people than white people. It was something that Smith and Shepard were concerned about.
So I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, cool. That is a good idea. Like, let's focus on the real stuff is kind of my mentality. I'm like, this is going to be awesome.
Takaya Smith shows up at this meeting and finds a seat. It's on the east end of Charleston, which is a diverse area, but most of the audience is white. They had called the meeting because there had been a spate of burglaries in that part of town. The police wanted to tell the folks that they had found the culprits. And Smith is waiting for her chance to bring up the numbers.
The closer I know I'm getting to speaking, my heart's beating, and I'm like, oh my God, okay, there's like 5 or 6 officers up there, and I know I'm going to bring up this like racial component. And so I get up, I'm like standing tall, and I'm like, what are you all going to do about the racial disparity in Charleston, where blacks are 2.4 times more likely to be arrested than whites? And the whole mood shifts, because before I had spoke, every person is just passing the mic, praising CPD for doing such a great job. You guys are doing the right thing. I mean, just over and over again. So everyone shifted. And so the officer, it's tense. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, you're not aware of this? And he was like, he gets very defensive. He's like, we treat everyone the same. I don't know what you're talking about. And then, so I'm about to say something back, and somebody comes and takes the mic out of my hand. And once again, I don't know what she's talking about. You all always do the right thing. And it happened like 3 or 4 people after me who were just like totally shutting down what I had brought up and praising the officers. And I went to that meeting alone, and it just was just a terrible feeling.
In my mind that day, it was a bit of an ambush.
This is Steve Cooper. He was actually the detective who Smith addressed at this meeting. At that moment, he remembers feeling like her data were taken out of context, and it wasn't the right time or place for such a discussion.
It's not that the question was not legitimate. The forum was maybe not the most conducive to good communication.
So finally, the meeting ends. Takaya is still sitting there. She's embarrassed, and she's really ready to leave.
And so, like, as I'm standing up, something just switched over, and it was like, no, don't do that. How can you turn this into a positive? Like, do not leave with this much of a fail. And so I walk up to the officer and I say, if I can get you that data, could we have a meeting? And he said, yeah, if you can get me that data, I'd really like to see that. We can have a meeting. And I said, okay. I just didn't want to leave like the crazy lady who, just brought up race or...
I'm sorry, the crazy lady or the crazy black lady?
Oh, yeah. I mean, for sure, the crazy black lady. Like the black girl who came and pulled the race card.
After the meeting, Smith went and told her boss, Lyda Shepard, what had happened. And she was surprised.
I say certainly the expectation wasn't necessarily that she would feel shut down in the way that she was and publicly put the police department on the spot like that. But that was the choice that she made, and I think that it created an opening.
Even before Smith went to this meeting, Shepard, as program director for the American Friends Service Committee, had been talking to like-minded folks around Charleston. They joined with the local ACLU and NAACP chapters, along with some other groups. Eventually, these folks would call themselves the CARE Coalition. That stands for Call to Action for Racial Equality. And this coalition started meeting regularly with the police department. Their first meeting was in October of 2015 with then Chief of Police Brent Webster.
We just started talking about racial arrest statistics, body cameras, training, implicit bias, things like that. And we have the most diversity in the state. So it just made a lot of sense to get everybody to the table.
Takaya Smith was at these initial meetings too. And even though Chief Webster was willing to hear her out, she says there was still some tense moments between the two of them.
we didn't agree on everything. I mean, you have an older white man and a younger black woman, and I'm a part of this coalition that is presenting this racial disparity, that blacks are maybe not treated the same as whites, and he could have easily shut down.
But he didn't. That doesn't mean there wasn't some reluctance. After a short break,
many of them coming in well armed, metaphorically speaking, armed around, oh, they're here to tell us that we're racist cops.
From my perspective, my own class, the arms became uncrossed, as the day went on. I have to give the instructors a lot of credit. There was no reason for anybody to be defensive.
I'm Trey Kay, and this is Us and Them, which is supported in part by the West Virginia Humanities Council, the CRC Foundation, and the Daywood Foundation.
In difficult times, music gives us peace, brings us together, and helps heal us. It calms our nerves and brightens our days. That's why we're bringing you classic episodes of Mountain Stage on air and in our podcast. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find something that's familiar or brand new and feel the power of live music on our website, mountainstage.org.
Chief Webster and his department kept meeting with the coalition for more than a year. Their first meeting had taken place just 3 months after Sandra Bland was found dead in her jail cell, following an altercation with police in Hempstead, Texas. Memories of rioting in Ferguson and Baltimore after Michael Brown and Freddie Gray died at the hands of police were still fresh in everybody's minds. These meetings were still taking place in July when an officer shot Philando Castile in a routine traffic stop in suburban St. Paul, Minnesota. It was clear to both Chief Webster and the coalition that the next explosive incident could just as well happen in Charleston, West Virginia. And they didn't want to take that chance. Which is why, after over a year of meetings, they came to an agreement. The police and the coalition would implement 8 new measures. Some of these measures were meant to help activists work better with the police, like community service awards or a youth advisory board. Other measures were meant to improve trust in the police, things like body cameras and more transparency around arrest statistics. And a big one, the police agreed to undergo anti-racism and de-escalation training.
This training was not part of a lawsuit. This training was not part of any kind of peer pressure. We did it. And I could have said no to it.
We were not expecting him to go, yeah, I think that is necessary. We would love to do that.
That's Lyda Shepard again. She says that with this training, the coalition wasn't trying to chastise or label the police officers as evil racists. They were trying to awaken the officers to the deeper, more pervasive bias about people of color that they might not even know they have. But not all of the officers were as willing as Chief Webster.
There was definitely a ton of resistance that we expected because, yes, we knew this was a mandatory training that they had to come to and spend 8 hours. And so many of them coming in well armed, metaphorically speaking, armed around, oh, they're here to tell us that we're racist cops.
Take Steve Cooper, the officer whom Takaya Smith had confronted at that earlier meeting. He's a white guy who grew up in a town outside of Charleston with a high concentration of black families. He went to West Virginia State College, a historically black college, now a university, the same institution Takaya Smith attends. And Cooper isn't just a guy who happens to be a cop. His uncle was a Charleston cop. His son is a Charleston cop. And as of this summer, he was promoted to chief of police, succeeding outgoing Chief Webster. So going in, he could understand why his fellow officers may be skeptical of these trainings.
And some may have had their arms folded a little bit. I don't think the officers were closed-minded. I think the officers have seen incidents where law enforcement was blamed for an incident that caused maybe even civil unrest. And once it was determined that, hey, now that that situation has been investigated and ferreted out, it turns out that the officer did not act inappropriately. but there was never the retraction. So the police officers feel skeptical of national media and feel like maybe they're going to get railroaded.
In other words, here was just another group out to make the cops look bad. But Cooper himself attended one of these anti-racism training sessions, and he said that there was a moment that really got to him. It was during a session led by Reverend Ron English. English has been a minister in Charleston since the 1970s. He was ordained by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And during the training, he told a story about something that happened to him in Georgia decades ago in the Jim Crow era. I asked him to tell me the story. Oh, and heads up, while telling the story, the Reverend mentions the N-word.
I was coming back about 1 o'clock in the morning from having done this job, and I was pulled over by a trooper. And when I got out to ask him, why did you stop me? He just slapped me in the hand with his flashlight and said, nigga, I don't have to have a reason to stop you. He did find that a registration had expired. But when he put me in the back of the car, I became aware that this was a very dangerous situation, and I don't know whether we're going to arrive at the police station or not, because there have been times when black males have been put in the back of police cars and never heard from again.
Reverend English survived that incident. But then, many years later, he was coming back home to Charleston from a family vacation. It was in the middle of the night again, and he was about to run out of gas. So when he passed a police headquarters near Parkersburg, West Virginia, he decided to spend the night in their parking lot and wait until a gas station opened in the morning. A police officer came outside. When Reverend English sees him, he immediately thinks back to that racist cop in Georgia. He tells the officer what he's doing there.
He said, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to call Joe down at, and he would, as I tell it now, I become a little emotional. I'm going to call Joe, who owns a station right down the street, and tell him he's got to open up earlier because he has a customer coming. And not only am I going to call him to open the station, but I'm going to follow you down there to make sure you and your family get there safely. My point was that how I had carried the image of that officer down south to the person that was offering to help in West Virginia. I wanted to use that as an illustration of how certain perceptions are just kind of ingrained, affect our behavior and how we see people.
I look around the room and I see 20 or 30 cops all listening to this story.
Here's Chief Cooper again.
Shaking their heads, back slowly, no, this is something that's terrible to hear. And to watch Reverend English tell the story, he was just very matter of fact about it. But the officers in the room, you could see the empathy and the sympathy on their faces.
At the beginning of these trainings, some of the police might have been skeptical. But over the course of the day-long training session, many of them warmed up. Here's former police chief Brent Webster again.
From my perspective, my own class, the arms became uncrossed, as the day went on. I have to give the instructors a lot of credit. There was no reason for anybody to be defensive. I mean, it was very open-minded in the sense that they're taking a lot of questions, and they even said, you may not agree with this topic, but let's discuss white privilege. Let's discuss institutional racism.
The training was intended to raise awareness of systemic racism among the police force. But along the way, it also ended up broadening the trainers' perspectives, like Lyda Shepard, who helped lead some of the sessions.
One of the things that we opened up with, just as kind of an icebreaker, was go around, say your name, say a little bit about yourself, and say your favorite place in West Virginia. And what was so fascinating to me was that I would say half of the police officers, so say 20 out of 40 in that room, said their chair in their living room or either their house or some specific place in their house. I'm expecting, usually when I've done this, it's like Babcock State Park, Wheeling, whatever. It is a place outside your home. And what that told me was Just the stress of being a police officer, the sort of lack of safety that they feel. And so their home is where they can really feel relaxed and safe and not on guard.
Today, Chief Cooper says the trainings fit right into his vision of how to make the police department better serve the entire community.
We have a customer service attitude. Your clients are not going to be satisfied if they were treated rudely, if they were disregarded because of the color of their skin. They should be treated as if they're family. We invested in a lot of training where officers are learning about cultural differences, because a lot of race relations is about cultural awareness. Just because someone raises their voice, that doesn't mean that they are attacking the officer. So we learned that, sometimes cultural differences may include mannerism, may include the way people communicate with each other. We have to learn to recognize these things, and we learn how to not misunderstand them.
Now, it's too early to see clear results from these initiatives. There's no hard evidence that disparity in arrests, for example, has gone away. But everyone involved thinks that real progress has been made. Take former Police Chief Webster.
I believe that the police-community relations are the best they've ever been, and we just got to keep working hard.
Even Takaya Smith, whose frustration with the department's treatment of black folks got the ball rolling, is optimistic these days.
Something like this, a partnership and a collaboration, a grassroots effort, is something really new. Mostly what we've got is hopefulness and positivity and even relief. It's like, oh my gosh, finally somebody really doing something positive. You can see positivity on the side of the police and on the side of the citizens and the community. And that feels good for a lot of people. It really does.
As a native son of Charleston, I can't help but feel encouraged when I hear that. Hearing how Ms. Smith and Police Chief Cooper have managed to find some common ground since their initial confrontation. Hearing how the police and community organizers have basically agreed on what needs to happen. It all seems like a real warm and fuzzy, but ultimately productive moment. Everyone has seen the unrest and violence happening in other cities like Ferguson and Baltimore, and they've realized that those same kind of tensions might lurk here in Charleston. And they've chosen to be proactive in addressing similar problems before something tragic happens. I really admire their work and their progress. But I have to admit, I'm still nervous. I've heard from people I've known all my life, mostly white people, who say that we're beyond race, that because we've made all this progress, race doesn't matter anymore, and that everyone will be treated equally. Sure, the police have made a commendable effort to understand and talk across the racial divide. But what about the rest of Charleston? It's too early to conclude that all Charlestonians, or even most of them, have stopped seeing each other through a prism of race. In November 2016, James Means, a black teenager, was shot and killed in Charleston.
William Pulliam is in jail tonight and is being charged with first-degree murder.
Pulliam admits to shooting Means twice in the stomach, calling it self-defense.
I just shot him. I felt my life was in danger.
Now let's be clear about this. William Pulliam is not a police officer. He's a citizen. But he is white, and according to the criminal complaint, Pulliam stated that by killing Means, he was taking, quote, another piece of trash off of the street. Of course, the police department's new initiatives weren't in response to this case. These trainings were underway long before James Means was shot. But nonetheless, Pulliam's trial is going to take place sometime in 2018. And I think this trial could expose a fissure between the white and black community of Charleston. And the police department is going to be in the middle of whatever happens. I'm not the only one concerned about this. Police Chief Cooper told me that his department has met with some black ministers to plan what might happen if Pulliam is not convicted.
We call that a negative verdict because we believed in that case. And what we have here is we have a white man who is charged with murdering a young African-American male. And that causes an emotional reaction in the African-American community, regardless of the motive, because it is a reminder of past crimes where the motive is known, and that motive was racism.
That kind of verdict could rile up the national media and bring a lot of protesters to town. There could be high-profile standoffs between angry activists and the Charleston police, which could undo all this goodwill that the city has been building up. So I'm nervous to see how my hometown will weather this test. In an upcoming episode, we're going to take a closer look at the James Means shooting and what it could mean for Charleston. You've been listening to Us and Them. Our show was written and produced by me, Trey K, Jake Smith, and Mitch Hanley. Loretta Williams is the editor. Michael Lipton and Tristan Lozow wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo. Rita Krisofi and Mariana Trofimova provide us with images for the web. The marvelous people at PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the West Virginia Humanities Council, the CRC Foundation, and the Daywood Foundation. Us and Them was originally developed with assistance from the mentorship program at AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio. And on a bittersweet note, we'd like to acknowledge Joni Deutsch, who's been our digital producer and who has guided our project since the early days, and who has led our team's Michael McDonald fan club.
He came from somewhere back in who long ago.
Our beloved Joni has accepted a new position as producer with WFAE, an NPR member station in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Once in her life, she musters a smile.
We are delighted for her with her new opportunity, but we are seriously bummed to lose her sunny outlook and serious get-things-done skills. When I think of Joni going away, my face contorts into a mask of sadness.
She had a place in his life.
Joni, we're going to miss you tremendously. Here's to you taking your positive, infectious energy, along with your wonderful talent and skills, and taking them to where it matters, where the rubber meets the road. Taking them to the streets.
Taking it to the streets. No more need for running.
Hey, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Us and Them.
We're taking it to the streets.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
From PRX.